To start, this is our first theme. The condition of America's economy affected people on various levels in regards to daily life and education, whether it was because of unforeseen circumstances or as a direct result of government action.
Financial struggle is a phenomenon found in any culture. In a society where the economy is based on capitalism, downfall is not attributed to the people as one might think. Instead, instances of rising prices are a result of the actions of both people and the government. Take the Great Depression as an example. The Great Depression was caused by lack of economic discipline and was a hard time for many who lived during the era, but it was especially difficult for Richard Greenblatt's family, who worked on a farm.
Well, my parents had been married for about 10 years, 11 years when I was born, and they had a farm, and they were reasonably successful. It was a sizable farm, and they had dairy cattle, and they had beef cattle, and they had raised hogs, and they raised sheep, and they raised turkeys, and they had chickens. And everything in that farm was burned down. And my father, it's interesting, the double tragedy was that particular evening it was getting cold. My dad thought he ought to bring the beef cattle in from the pasture, and he did. And so they were separate barn. There was, and of course the tool shed, the machine shed, which carried all the machinery, and the cow and horse barn, and the dairy cow barn, and the hog and the sheep. Every single building burned except the house. And during that fall, there were about 3 other farms, and they think there was an arsonist who was involved, but they lost. They lost, so they had to borrow a lot of money to get back into farming. They lost absolutely everything. My dad was able to get a team of mules out of the barn, and beyond that was nothing. So they borrowed money, and then that was this fall 1927, and so 2 years later, and I was born in the meantime, the Depression came, and the price of the products that this farmer sold went to almost nothing, and so they had a debt they couldn't pay. They could not pay the debt off, and so the banks foreclosed, and we had to move to town. The Depression was getting worse, and more people were being laid off, and then fortunately, so things were really pretty grim. My mother would go out and clean houses, and she did dishwashing in a restaurant, and she also baked pies for a restaurant, and did babysat kids, so forth. And on the one hand, but it was in terms of the family, it was sort of interesting, the dynamics of the family, that all the kids had jobs, or got, as soon as they were able to do something, got jobs, and they contributed to the family. It was family, and so the relationship with the parents and the children was strong, because you had this were stronger. And then Franklin Roosevelt became president, and things got better little by little by little, and more before they got much better. At least people had hope they were going to get better, because the government was trying to do something for them. My father worked any chance he got. He would work, and for whatever, maybe a couple of days work here and a day there, that sort of thing. And then finally he got later in the Depression he got a job, and but it was a number of years without. So I would say he had 10 really bad, tough years. And then furthermore, he's getting older, and of course, so your chance of getting a good job wasn't that great. In some ways, it was a very good very good childhood. In other ways, there's no question that that it was took a terrible strain on my parents, you know. To have 4 kids now, how are we going to feed these 4 kids? So that was but within the family, it was just, I think, a very good relationship. Everybody was involved.
After the Great Depression, education began to become more important to American citizens. In some places, people were expected to go to college, but college tuition was a concern, especially for middle and lower class families. Some of the children from these families chose to join the military in order to gain enough money to go to college.
Is a more recent graduate because he went into the military first. And part of his reasoning to go into the military was to get college paid for, because he did not want me to have to pay for it. And of course, he didn't want the debt either. So he went into the military, and they paid for most of it. But, you know, he still has a loan from college.
Although the government normally did not interfere with America's education system, Ronald Reagan, the governor of California, decided to step in.
Well, one thing that was very significant to me was when Ronald Reagan was elected governor, because he raised tuition. I was in college at the time, and he raised tuition, and it was kind of freaking everybody out that, oh gosh, how are we going to finish college now? We're not going to have enough money. And when I look back, it was like, that was very reasonable. If you look at the cost of living index, it was probably half, you know, in today's dollars, it was probably half of what kids are paying nowadays.
On January 28, 1986, Christel McAuliffe, a teacher, was sent up in a spacecraft in order to teach children about space, from space. 73 seconds after liftoff, the spacecraft exploded, killing everybody inside. This event drastically affected the science industry, both physically and in terms of atmosphere.
We all, being a scientist, and my brothers, I have 2 brothers that were scientists also, one that used to come down practically every weekend. Anyway, so the influence is, you know, looking at these things and the space program closely and being aware of what's going on. And I remember, you know, watching the TV, and there it was. I was like, wait a minute, this can't be right. You know, it just was quite devastating, because we thought we were all powerful. We thought, you know, we could do anything, and then wait a minute, something went wrong. And then all of a sudden there was this lack of confidence, like maybe we couldn't do everything and be everything in the space program. And of course, immediately a lot of the funding dried up. And but as a whole, I think that it made people realize that maybe we shouldn't push so fast. Maybe there needs to be more checks, and that you don't just send people up not knowing that it is safe and that they will come back, because, you know, human life is precious, and even if you have to spend another couple $1 million to wait and check things out, is worth it.
Other important issues of American economy included the amount citizens were taxed on Social Security retirement.
A very horrible thing, and coincidentally, my wife and I bid on a trip to Brooklyn Fire Station, and where they lost 4 of their men in 9/11, and so we went back there and had dinner, and one of the other men that didn't die was there, and he heard all the bodies hit the ground, and he was devastated, so he had to take 6 months off just for therapy. And now you get so much money from Social Security, and then you don't pay taxes on all of it. You used to pay taxes on 50% of it, And then Clinton just came in there and it raised it to 85%. And so, so in a sense, he's taking money every year from me, and that's against the democratic principles, to take money from the people that you're supposed. But he slicked it in there and got through ARP and all these organizations, and they didn't bat an eyelash. So I think the economy is very good, and I think if the government, I'm a Democrat, but I think sometimes the government gets in too much, and they should let these companies be, and they'll do all right, so.
However, for the millennials, money is no longer their biggest concern.
In some areas, some articles I read, millennials, they want to find a job that they love to do instead of just find any job and stuff like that. Also interesting to see, like, an article so that millennials, they actually, instead of going and shopping and spending money on clothes and stuff, they like to spend more money on experiences.
Now moving to our next theme of technology.
Although technological advancement has provided benefits concerning the military and increasing the availability of knowledge, it has also regressed personal interaction, distancing people away from others.
Technology advances fairly quickly, new creation year after year. Technology has changed so much and so fast. The way we get information has also changed.
I'm big on knowledge, and I think back then, if I wanted to, I was telling my kids, if I wanted to learn something, I actually had to physically walk to my library, which is like 2 or 3 miles away. Now, you can just literally go on Google or pretty much any website and be able to download anything or read anything. Even books and all that stuff is free. You just need to access it and have the motivation and desire to be able to collect all this information based on what you're interested in.
So I think it's better for connecting with people that aren't close to you geographically. So if you have family overseas or back east or something, then technology is amazing. You can FaceTime and they can see you and you can see them, etc.
Furthermore, technology was also a large support in aiding the military. For the last century, the United States had been considered a superpower, with advanced technology that was often beneficial in wars. Despite its accomplishments, technology has its drawbacks where it creates a separation between real-life interactions.
Yes, because I definitely think that it changes everyone's lives a lot. It makes everyone a lot more connected, but also I feel like in a way it's been bad since people now are just glued to their smartphones everywhere, and sometimes it makes us miss out on kind of real life things happening, and everyone is just always looking down at their phone, and like even kids in high school. When I was in high school, I didn't have a smartphone, and now everyone is, and especially using all these social media tools such as Snapchat, Instagram, everyone's just a lot more connected, and in a way it's good, but then I can also see it as a negative thing as well.
Our next section involves the theme of people's views of the government.
Prior to the wars, people viewed the federal government as infallible. However, wars revealed the corruption within the U.S. government and thus resulted in a loss of hope throughout the entire nation. During World War II, the people had hope and faith in the government, and therefore the U.S. government was able to support the country and its people. However, during the Vietnam War, people did not know what they were fighting for, and therefore the government was unable to support the country and its people as they had in the past because the citizens started to lose hope in the government. People had previously thought that America was a powerful nation with strong and just leadership.
I don't think he was a bad person. I don't think he was a bad leader, but he was kind of cornered into feeling or doing things that the public assumed that Kennedy was going to do. And I don't think the public had the knowledge that people have nowadays about current events. So people didn't really understand what was going on in Vietnam. And I think President Johnson kind of got it caught up in what the expectations were rather than what he felt was right.
this made that generation of Americans realize that the government is not always the virtuous leader of the people, conducting World War II and beating back fascism and, creating the welfare state to, lift up everybody, that actually the government is perfectly capable of lying to the people without any shame at all. And I think that people came to feel very let down by the realization that the government could be so duplicitous.
It's like, how stupid can people get, like Nixon and that, what the heck are they doing? And it just shows that you can go from, in my opinion, a fine statesman like Kennedy to a low life like Nixon, like he just, and just he got down to, common criminal stuff, breaking in, entry, and so yeah, and so it was sort of like sad that a president of the United States would be involved in something like that.
The war in Vietnam was important for me because I began to realize that what the government and what politicians were saying was absolutely not true. Sometimes, maybe half the time. And that reasons given for important commitments like war were often not authentic. And so I began to think differently about my country and about the government, not less patriotic or proud of my country, but I think a little bit more suspicious of the government.
And lastly, moving on to the topic of outside aggression.
Outside aggression caused a sense of fear that united the nation. One would think that people's views about the government would have ruined a sense of nationalism. However, these outside aggressions have only caused a common sense of vulnerability that brought the nation closer together. One such instance was 9/11. 9/11 was the day the Islamist extremist group Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 commercial airlines where 3 crashed into the NYC World Trade Center and the Pentagon. A total of over 3,000 people were killed. As recalled by a survivor, "For just a moment, I looked back again at the World Trade Centers burning in the sky, but then turned away, fearing that I would see someone else jump to their death." Despite the fact that this event happened on the East Coast, news of the terrorist attack shocked the entire nation.
Realizing that everything can be taken away from you in an instant. But yeah.
Some teachers kind of stopped class or paused class to kind of follow the news of the day. But it was scary, definitely scary.
So I was sophomore at San Diego State. I was in San Diego. I woke up for class and my roommate told me what had happened and all that. And you kind of watch the news, but you don't really fully understand what had occurred yet. So I had class, so I went to school. And you could just tell something was different. It was really quiet. I mean, this was a school when I was there. There was, over 30,000 kids, and you didn't really see anyone. And you get to your classroom, and there was no teacher. There was a half a dozen kids sitting in the room with the TV on, and they were all watching the news and kind of wander around the halls. And everyone has the classroom TVs are on, and everyone's kind of watching what was happening. So as I started to understand how big of an incident this was, I don't think I felt threatened in any way. I mean, I was, almost as far away from the country as I possibly could be. But, we have family all over the country and in Europe and things like that. And so everyone was calling us to see if we were okay or if there was any issue with us and things like that. And so that part was pretty scary, and just tracking down where everyone was.
Baby boomers to millennials agree that 9/11 created a sense of national unity. However, it is also important when describing the American essence to bring up other events that shocked the nation. One such event was the bombing of Pearl Harbor. According to a Silent Generation interviewee, the Japanese attack propelled United States of America to undertake the thought of revenge, thus increasing nationalism just like what happened after 9/11.
We were trying to, in a sense, revenge the attack on Pearl Harbor, and so it was like almost almost everybody was with the program, and all the young men, many of the young men joined the military.
The urgency of the matter captured the attention of many Americans, and because of this united fervor, people were eager to fight in World War II. The history of what defines Americans we live with today encompasses both corruption and great leadership, economic struggle and prosperity, happiness and tragedy. Looking at the vantage point of the current, it is easy to reflect on the themes that have defined us as who we are. But what about what people currently think about themselves? We asked this very question to millennials, and this is what they had to say.
The millennials, my generation, are viewed as sometimes very, very selfish, very self-serving, because we had all these opportunities, we had all these things from the current day technology, and just the growth with it. We grew up with the internet, and then we chose to make things like Facebook. We chose to make things like freaking Snapchat, and all these forms of what to them probably seems like very cheap social media, very cheap and very shallow forms of communication. On top of that, if you look at the culture of Silicon Valley, if you look at the culture of technology nowadays, once again, it's very fast-paced, and everyone just wants to get ahead. Everyone wants to push himself to the limit for them, for me. And I definitely believe that the older generations look at us and say sometimes, oh, what a waste. They chose to go that route.
Maybe as we age as millennials, we will be able to see past this, but maybe not, since we are editing this video with footage about ourselves and our generation.